Hey everybody, Kevin here, and welcome back to another episode of Mastering Jig Building. So in today's episode, we're going to go over kind of what I talked about in the last episode, or part, or whatever you want to call it, the why, the what, and the how of jig building.
The why, the what, and the how.
So the first thing I'd like to say is there is no right or wrong way to build a jig. There is only your way. It's kind of like cooking. You find your favorite ingredients to use, you use what you like the most, and you build on that. Everybody will develop their own style, their own way of doing things. What works best for you might not work best for somebody else. So don't worry about doing exactly what I do, because what I do is what I do. And you should do what you do. You be you. So that being said, there is no right or wrong way to make a jig. If you think of a way of building a jig and it works for you and it's safe and you feel comfortable with it, then that's the way you do it. I'm here just to guide you along the pathway of building jigs because there's a million different ways of doing it. I'm just going to explain the way I do it because that's just me. The first thing I always ask myself is 3 questions, and those are, why am I building a jig? What the hell is it for? And how the hell is it going to work when it's all said and done? The why, the what, and the how. And I always ask myself that question every single time. Sometimes I don't even get past why. Why do I need to build a jig? Because sometimes I can't get past why. What? If I get stuck at any of those, usually I don't wind up building a jig. And I'm working on a job right now where I had 4 different pieces of curved molding to make on an elliptical window. And none of these are the same. And I figured it's going to take me longer to make a jig than it would to actually just make the parts freehand. And I'll show you all this at the end of the video, how I went about it. And yeah, so let's get into the why, the what, and the how of jig building. All right, let's get into it. Roll the intro.
The why, the what, and the how.
So the why, the what, and the how, right? You're like, oh, that's just dumb. Well, let me explain a few things here. So the why, the first reason you ask yourself, why am I building a jig? There's 2 reasons. One, if you're going to duplicate a part or make a cut over and over again, right? And you want it exactly the same every single time, that's a good reason to build a jig. And the second part of that is safety. So let's say you're wanting to make some raised panels, but you don't have a raised panel cutter or a shaper, and you want to do it on your table saw. And this is a perfect example right here. And this was all made on the table saw right here. The back's all cut out. This is a hunk of pine. This is from an old kitchen that I did a while ago. But this is all made on the table saw. And cutting these edges here, you can see how they're beveled at like 7.5 degrees. That's not bad when it's like this. Right here is where the table saw grabbed a hold of it and went, merp. And that's not very good. Plus, going up on the edge like this is not a good idea, so I made the tall fence jig. And there's a video of it over here. Or you can see a picture of me using it over here. The tall fence jig allowed me to make the 7-degree cut on a 3-inch fence because I made the fence like 20 inches tall. And this is a door that I actually made. I made an extra one by mistake.
Nice.
That I used on that tall fence jig. And you can imagine making a 7-degree cut on a bevel on a table saw, right? With this thing on a little 3-inch fence. That would be bad, that'd be dangerous. Didn't feel very good when I was doing it, so I made a tall fence jig. And you can see me using it right here, right? And there you go. So that's one reason. The 2 reasons are duplicating something over and over, making a cut, like make a little bevel on this raised panel over and over again, and safety. That's a good thing. If you don't feel safe and you can't use your 2 hands, like I've said before, you feel unsafe using your 2 hands making a certain type of cut. I don't know what it is. It doesn't matter what it is. If you don't feel comfortable, you should probably be making a jig or find somebody else to do it for you. Right. So it doesn't matter if you're working on your table saw, your bandsaw, your disc sander, whatever. If you don't feel safe doing something, figure out how to make yourself a jig so you can feel safer. So I was trying to cut down this 90 right here into 245s. Because I needed it for a job, I made this little tiny jig, and you've seen it on one of the last videos, and I made this for my bandsaw and not my table saw because I needed more of the material. But I had to think through the why, the what, and the how, and that's what I came up with this guy right here, because I didn't want to get my fingers close to it, which this works out well. You just put this in here like this, and then if you watch my other video, you've seen it. And put that in there like that, and just clamp that down, that holds it into place, and I bandsaw it. and it goes through and you stop and you pull it back out and you have two 45s. That's the way my brain worked, and it's all made out of scrap, and it didn't take very long to build this at all. And then I had to build another jig to sand it on because it felt weird on my disc sander to take my fingers, and I'll put a picture over here trying to sand that little piece. So I made another jig to put another clamp on and actually disc sand it square. Cutting things the exact same way multiple times in a row every single time. I go back to this jig again. This had a fence on it. You can see where it cut right through it. It cut this 90-degree corner into a 45, and it did that time and time again. I needed 12 of these things, and I made all 12 using this jig. So it was repetition and safety, because I didn't want my fingers anywhere near this thing when I was cutting it. Okay, so much for that. So the main two reasons for the why is why am I building a jig? It's going to be for multiple cuts over and over again, duplicating parts, and safety. So for making multiple cuts, and it can be very complicated cuts like this guy right here. This guy used 5 different table saws. And I know this is on the most amazing thing I ever saw ever, whatever is over here. I haven't forgot about this. I just haven't had time to set this up. It's going to take like 25 jigs for me to build this. 25 different jigs. The guy had 5 table saws set up specifically to make these 3-dimensional stars, or I don't even know what the hell you call it in there, icahedron. It's a 5-pointed star on steroids is what it is. But this took forever for him to figure out. 5 different table saws. Each one had 5 different jigs, plus sanding jigs and all the other stuff and glue up jigs just to make this. So sometimes for repeated cuts, and that's not even a very complicated cut. You can see that? You can see each one, this is one piece and this is the other piece. There's 80 some odd pieces in this whole thing. So that's kind of crazy. But yeah, so multiple cuts and safety. That's the why. Okay, so now that we know why we're building a jig, now what? What the hell is a jig for? What's it going to be? How's it, how's another thing? How is the last thing? How? The next thing you need to ask yourself is, what tool is it for? Is it going to be for your table saw, your bandsaw, your drill press, your sanders, or your router table? Or is it going to be for your chop saw? Once you figure out that then you're going to ask yourself, well, what's your timeline? Because me being a contractor, my timeline is very important to me. Some people will spend days and weeks building jigs, and that's fine. If you have the time to do it, days and weeks. This took months to figure out. Months. And the guy had time, he was retired. For me, I run a business, I'm a contractor, and usually, as you can see, they're done very quickly with whatever I got laying around, whatever scrap I have laying around. Even this is all scrap. So if it's fast or if it's slow, that's up to you. You have to figure that out. What hardware do you need? It's the other one. So you're gonna buy hardware like this stuff right here, where you have a little flippy flapper that goes on a jig somewhere for measuring and duplicating the same cut over and over again, because this isn't very expensive and it works good. Or do you need to buy yourself some miter rails like this guy right here that go in the rail, the miter rail of your table saw or your bandsaw or disc sander, edge sander, stuff like that. Do you need to buy this stuff? Or like me, you're just cheap and you use a hunk of wood, a piece of maple that's just sitting there, and you just nail it on there and use that for whatever, because it's quick and easy. And it's good to know what your timeline is, because if you have time, you should build a jig to the best of your ability and take your time and enjoy it. But if you don't, like me, I build it as fast as possible, and it's very utilitarian. I just go. The next what you're going to ask yourself is, what materials are you going to make it out of? And if you saw the last video, you know I love my MDF. I love my MDF. But I don't mind using, some pre-finished maple, some leftover cherry, some poplar, whatever I got laying around is what I'm going to use. Like this, even Purple Heart and some old leftover plywood I have from a job with a little rail. That should always be made out of maple or something very hard. So the other what question you can ask yourself is, what other tools can I use it for? So a lot of the times I'll make a jig for my table saw, and I'll think, hey, can I use that on my bandsaw too? Because they're kind of set up the same way, right? You run a piece of wood through and it cuts. So when I'm making a table saw jig, I always ask myself, will that work on my bandsaw? And what do I need to do to alter it to make it work for both? Especially if it's a jig I'm going to keep. So if you can use one jig for more than one tool, you're going to be ahead of the game. It's just a thought. That's always good to think in your head. All right, well, I make a disc sander jig that's going to do this. Can I use this on the edge sander also? They kind of go together. They work a little differently, but you can make a jig that would work for both. And it's better to make a jig that works for 2 tools than just 1 tool. All right, now the how. Ooh, how the hell are we gonna go about doing this? All right, so the first one is, how's it gonna work? The first thing you should do when you ask yourself the how questions, how it's gonna work, how's this jig gonna work? You should stand in front of the tool you think you're gonna make it for and sit there and imagine how it's gonna work, where your hands are gonna be, how it's gonna, you're just gonna push it through, is it gonna have clamps holding it down, is it gonna have a guard on it so you don't get crap in your face? Does it need its own little vacuum sucker upper, because sometimes jigs get clogged up. When you're asking yourself how and you're standing in front of that tool, make a little drawing. All right, I'm gonna do it like this, boom. All right, and then once you got that in your head, try to imagine what other tool it would be good for or safer on, which is another good one, because it's all about safety when you're working with wood and power tools, because you don't want to lose anything. You don't want to look like this here. Like I had a teacher that looked like this one time, yeah, like that. Make yourself a drawing, and if you have time, sleep on it. Think about it, go about, do something else. The next day, come back in, do the same exact thing, and go, oh, okay, because if you're gonna spend time and money on building a jig, it's better to overthink it than underthink it, because there's nothing worse than building a jig and then going, oh crap, I could have used this tool on it too, and I could have put this clamp on it, but now I got all this other crap in the way and I can't do it. So that's, how is a big question. I got fleas. So how are you gonna build your jig? Are you gonna take just a piece of wood and flush trim a piece to it and just use double stick tape or screws to hold it on? Or are you gonna just pin something together really quick? Kind of like I did with this little guy right here for the disc sander. Plus I use double stick tape here to attach it to my miter gauge. Yeah. Or are you gonna use screws? Like sometimes you wanna put screws in the bottom of something to hold it in. This one I also pinned together, so there's a combination of different things. So how are you gonna build your jig? That's another question to ask yourself, because there's a million different ways to build a jig, just like there's a million different ways to make bacon and eggs. Now that you know how it's gonna be built and all this stuff and what you're gonna use and all that other stuff, and how much storage do you have? Because take it from me, Mr. Kevin, I ran out of storage years ago. So I'm having to go through old jigs and toss them out left and right. I don't even keep, hold on, let me show you something. So as I've gotten older and wiser, here's how I start making my jigs. See this? I'm gonna show you a job that I'm actually using this on. This is a piece I had to make, and then I made this piece. And this piece and this piece, I started with this 1/4 inch MDF, put it on a hunk of poplar, because I only had to do 4 cuts like this. All right. These are also jigs that I use, templates for the face frames, and I think I've showed you these before for the windows I'm making. This is the whole entire jig I made for a face frame. This is about as far as I get complicated for making jigs now. It ain't very complicated. And the reason is I don't have any storage. When I get done with this job and I'm done and this thing's installed, these are going into the fireplace and be burned up, or outside the fire pit or whatever, because I don't have storage space anymore. Because when I was younger, I made 9,000 jigs that I don't even use anymore, that have hardware on them and stuff, and I can go take the hardware off. But now I don't have time. Storage. How are you gonna store it? Where, so if you're gonna make yourself a big jig, you better think, where am I gonna store this? Because if you're in a little shop like mine, 420 square feet of nothingness, if you start building a whole bunch of jigs, you're gonna have no place to put them. I have jigs that are in my office that are like a closet full of jigs. So there it is, the why, the what, and how of jig building. Like I said earlier, building a jig all depends on the person. Everybody does things a certain way. You mill a certain way, you build a certain way, you're more comfortable a certain way, and until you get more experience, you're just gonna do it that way. And don't freak out about not being able to make a jig to make this thing, because this took a guy that did woodworking his entire life, months to build, to figure this out. And we're gonna have a whole video on this one of these days when I get a chance, but I'm busier than hell, and trying to get these little videos in between working is kind of a pain in the butt. So sorry if it takes every other week to get there, but that's the way it is for me. Sorry. But thanks for subscribing.
Subscribe
So
now.
it's important to run these little questions, the why, the what, and the how, through your head. They all kind of ramble together anyway, just like I tend to ramble on and on. But it's important to ask yourself these things, because you don't want to build yourself a jig where you're taking some time. You've bought some hardware like this stuff, and you put it on there, And then, lovey, you put this thing on there, and it goes on there like this and that and the other thing, and you realize, crap, if I would have done something different, I could have made this work on my bandsaw too. Or I could have made it work on this tool or that tool or whatever. So it's always good to think about more than one thing at once, which I do all the time, which is why these videos don't make any sense. So with experience, you get used to all this craziness going on through your head. It takes a little time to get used to building things, but it's always best when you're building a jig, think of safety first, and then, you know, all right, how am I going to do this over and over again? What other tools can I use this on? If you can use it for more than one tool, you're ahead of the game. And always think about that. And then ask yourself the why, the what, and the how questions. Sometimes I don't even make it past why.
What?
Why do I need to build a jig? And I'm going to show you a couple of pieces right here. So these curved parts right here, I thought about making a jig for. And I asked myself, why do I need to make a jig? Is it dangerous? No, it's not dangerous to make these. What is it for? It's to cover up jam. A jam that's not round, well, it's elliptical, but it's not symmetrical. These are totally different from each other. These two here, and these two are totally different from each other. They're longer. The radius carries longer on one side than the other. And there was a ton of things I was thinking about. I was like, okay, whatever. I'm just going to freehand them and make my own. And just by freehanding them. And I'll show you, I'm going to explain how I did this as soon as I get this crap out of the way. So basically I had to take these parts here, which I'll show you how they fit right here like this. Okay, we got that one there. You see it? And then this one goes in like that, meets on the center line. I got this guy here. I'm going to put it in right here. And then the last guy is over here. Okay? This whole piece here on the header, hopefully the thing's still up there, sits up about 1/4 inch. So this whole thing will be 1 inch thick when it's done. So there'll be a little round over, which I put on here, so it'll be a little offset. So this whole molding here will be down about 1/4 inch from where it is now. All right, here we go. So what I did is I grabbed some scrap wood that I had for making the frames originally, right? And, see, we can see this side center. I'm just gonna show you the left side here because it's better. So basically what I did is I took just a scrap piece of wood that I had laying around, all right? And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come to the farthest point in that I possibly can get it and get that radius, like this. Okay, boom. So the mark is from here to here, all right? So what I need to do is I need to get 3/4 inch here because the molding goes around. Okay, so here's what I did. I just took a hunk of wood like this, right? And this one actually has a miter on it, which will work pretty good. And I'm using this guy, which is a fat pencil. And I'm gonna take it and I'm just gonna go like this and I'll mark the whole damn thing. I'm gonna flip it over and go the other direction, right? Like this. I'm gonna carry it down. Okay, and that'll give you this piece here. That'll look like this. So you can, I usually go both directions and I hold it back about 1/8 inch just to get the thickness, and boom, like this. All right, that works. So I wanted to make it 3/4 inch. These guys, 3/4 inch. So that's what I use, a hunk of 3/4 inch. You can also do this. Let's say you didn't want to make 5/8 molding. Here's a 2-tip TSD thing from Mr. Kevin. I got one of these fender washers. You can also do the same thing like this. And this works really good. Just like that. Okay, once all that's done, I'm gonna take the same pencil and I'm gonna mark the inside before I even move anything. Okay, and it's a good idea to clamp your piece of wood down if you can. This is just a demonstration. And that'll give you these marks here. Okay, you see all that? What I'm gonna do first, I'm gonna bandsaw this out, and then I'm gonna edge sand that to the line as close as I can, and then I'm gonna sand it with my palm sander, my little Bosch sander, right? My little orbital sander, make that smooth. And then I'm going to shape it with my hand router. Shape that, boom, okay? Once I have this shaped and edged, I'm gonna sand the double bull noses. These guys right here. I'm gonna sand this edge first before I cut this out. And then once I have this sanded, double bull nosed, and then sanded the whole thing out, then I'm gonna take this on my bandsaw again and I'm gonna cut the back of the line, leave the line, I'm gonna go to my disc sander and I'm gonna disc sand it to the line all the way around, and then I'm going to fit that to the frame on here until it fits. And you can see it's not the most perfect thing in the world, but it's close. And this is 100 inches in the air, so you're not really going to see it that well. It's also going to be back like this, so there's going to be a 1/4 inch little blip here. I don't know if you can see that, but it makes for a nice shadow line. So these do not have to be absolutely perfect. And I did that to all of these pieces, all 4 of these pieces. I did the exact same way. I did these 2 first, and I kind of fit it to see if it would work, and then I finished it up by doing those 2 the exact same way. And that was all because I couldn't answer the why, what, and how question with certainty. It was just like, why do I want to make all these jigs for one thing? This is just one thing. So this is probably a super long video, but hopefully that helps. So sometimes you don't have to make a jig. You just have to be smarter than the wood and figure out how it's going to work. And that comes with time and a lot of screwing things up, which I'm good at. All right, well, there you go. Sometimes you need a jig and sometimes you don't. Sometimes you feel like a nut, and I always do. So, thanks for watching, everybody. If you have any questions, please comment below. And thank everybody who subscribed in the last couple of months. Thank you, everybody who subscribed. You don't have to hit the notification bell, whatever. If you see me on the YouTubes, give me a thumbs up and say hello. So hopefully that was helpful to somebody, the why, the what, and the hows of jig building. Next thing we're going to do, we're going to start building jigs. I'm going to show you, well, next thing I do, I'm going to show you hardware, how to put hardware on all your jigs. And we'll start with the table saw, and we'll just do simple little jigs. And we'll work our way up until whatever. If you have any questions, please comment below, and I'll get to them as soon as possible. If you have any questions about building jigs, comment below. And please subscribe, like, hit the notification bell, and fling, flang, the bang, bang. That was a little one, because we're running out of toilet paper again. This silly world we live in. You have an awesome day. Go outside and play. Hug somebody you love. Be safe out there, and I'll see you next time right here on Woodworking with Mr. Kevin. That's me, and thanks for watching the Mastering Jig Building, part 4001. Thanks for watching. Have an awesome day. Bye. My hair, look at my hair. My hair looks like a mess. It always does. That's what happens when you ain't got none. Let me read what I wrote down this morning because it was amazing. There is no right and wrong way to build a jig. There is only your way. That's pretty good, right? Or burping. Everybody has their own way of burping too. You've done it. So after you've done, it's very important. Very important. It's very important. You must listen to what I say. How to do the right thing the right way and the wrong thing the wrong way. Don't do the wrong thing the wrong way. Good golly. What did I just read? I forgot what I just read. Okay, so roll the intro, Mitro. So we're going to get into the why, the what, and the how of jig building, and thanks for watching. All right. Let's see. Okay, yeah. Okay, well, you know, then I made the curved jigs. Okay, all right, we'll start over. Take 450,000. Okay.